Black Bag is about two married spies who've been lying to each other for years. Neither knows the other works in intelligence. They think they've built a real marriage. Then their agencies put them on the same mission, and the structure collapses. The film tracks what happens when two people realize their entire relationship exists inside a framework of deception. The movie opens with married life. Morning routines, work commutes, dinner. Everything appears functional. But the camera lingers on specific moments, a pause before answering, a redirect in conversation, the way one watches the other leave. These are people trained to observe and control information. They've been doing it to each other without knowing it. When they cross paths on assignment, the recognition triggers a cascade. Each one begins reconstructing the timeline of their relationship, isolating moments, searching for patterns that indicate when deception started and how deep it runs. The operational premise, two spies on the same mission, is surface structure. What drives the film is the mechanics of trust failure. Both characters operate from the same skill set: compartmentalization, information control, behavioral prediction. Those tools serve them professionally. In marriage, those same tools created distance. Every conversation was edited. Every reaction was measured. They built a relationship where both people were performing optimized versions of themselves, and neither had access to what the other actually thought or felt. Now examine it from the husband's position. He maintained operational security because that's protocol. Keeping work separate from personal life isn't malice, it's training. If he tells her what he does, he exposes her to risk. If he keeps silent, he controls the threat radius. From his angle, silence is protection. The lie isn't personal. It's professional discipline applied to domestic space. He probably justified it as temporary at first, then habitual, then structural. By the time it might have mattered to tell the truth, the cost of revelation outweighed the benefit. Shift to the wife's angle. She's running the same calculation. She entered the marriage with an existing cover identity. Disclosing her real work means dismantling the foundation she's already built. If she tells him, she has to manage his reaction, recalibrate the relationship, and potentially compromise her operational integrity. If she stays silent, the marriage continues on stable terms. The choice isn't between honesty and deception. It's between two kinds of risk, and she picks the one that preserves control. The film doesn't frame this as betrayal. It frames it as parallel operational logic. Both people made the same decision using the same reasoning. They optimized for stability and security. What they didn't account for is that optimization removes the possibility of depth. A relationship built on information control can't generate intimacy, because intimacy requires unfiltered access. They created a marriage that functioned but never deepened. The structure alternates between present action and past moments. A scene from early in the relationship gets revisited with new context. What looked like spontaneous affection now reads as behavioral conditioning. What seemed like a disagreement over something minor now appears as a stress test, one person probing to see how the other reacts under pressure. The film recontextualizes their history not to prove everything was fake, but to show how operational thinking bleeds into personal interaction until the two become indistinguishable. Here's the deeper mechanism. Both characters were hired for the same traits: pattern recognition, emotional regulation, strategic thinking. Those traits made them effective at their jobs. Those same traits made them incapable of unguarded intimacy. When you're trained to analyze every social interaction for leverage, you can't stop analyzing your spouse. When you're conditioned to control information flow, you can't stop controlling what your partner knows. The job didn't corrupt the marriage. The job selected for people who would approach marriage as another system to manage. The question isn't whether they love each other. The question is whether love is even the relevant variable. They built something stable. They optimized for low conflict and high functionality. If neither person expected emotional transparency, then neither person was disappointed by its absence. The marriage worked because both people had compatible operational frameworks. It only breaks when external pressure forces them to ask whether compatibility is sufficient. From the husband's perspective, the relationship succeeded because it was efficient. He provided stability. She provided partnership. Both delivered what the other needed without requiring disruptive honesty. The lie wasn't a flaw in the system, it was the system. From the wife's perspective, the same logic applies. She built a marriage that didn't demand vulnerability she wasn't trained to give. The deception wasn't a failure. It was the only way the relationship could exist in the first place. The mission itself becomes irrelevant. The film uses it as a forcing function, something that strips away operational cover and makes them look at what they've built. When they sit across from each other with no more secrets to protect, the silence isn't tragic. It's diagnostic. They're discovering whether anything exists outside the operational structure they created. The film doesn't answer. It observes. Black Bag is about people who approached marriage as an intelligence problem. They applied the tools that made them successful professionally: compartmentalization, control, strategic omission, and created a relationship that functioned without ever becoming vulnerable. The film tracks what happens when that structure is removed. Not whether they reconcile. Not whether they forgive each other. Whether there was ever anything there that existed outside the framework they built. It's a film about optimization taken to its logical endpoint, where efficiency replaces depth, and neither person notices until the system collapses. What the film teaches: relationships require unfiltered access to survive long-term. Efficiency isn't intimacy. You can build something stable through control, but stability without vulnerability eventually becomes a structure with nothing inside it. The skills that make you successful in one domain can destroy you in another if you don't recognize when to stop applying them. Protection through silence has a threshold. Past that point, you're not protecting the other person, you're isolating them. Compartmentalization works until it becomes the only thing you know how to do. When you optimize a relationship for low risk, you also optimize out the possibility of depth. The film shows that real connection requires the willingness to be seen completely, even when exposure feels dangerous. It demonstrates that functional isn't the same as whole, and compatibility built on mutual deception will eventually demand a reckoning. The lesson is simple. If you treat intimacy as an operational problem, you'll solve for the wrong variables.